Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for a resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture. Visit capi-icpa.com to discover how.
Thank you to our show sponsors, the Corn School, the Pests and Predators podcast, and MMP. With deep roots in agriculture, MMP helps farm businesses make confident financial decisions. From planning to growth, their advisors are here to support your success. Learn more at mmp.ca. Hello, all. Welcome to the Agronomists. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, still in my temporary office. One more week, everybody. And from a very snowy Ottawa today. We had winter arrive with a vengeance yesterday, and I still managed to take 4 kids to a hockey game in the evening, white-knuckled it the whole way, and managed to show our exchange student from France what winter in Canada is all about. That's really what it's all about. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Of course, here, thanks for letting us know in the comments where you're from, what you're up to this week. If you collect those CEU credits, remember, head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists. Let us know you took in the show. We'll get you those credits. And while you're there, sign up for the email as well. It will remind you when we're going live and what's coming up on the show, as well as a couple fun stories of the week every Wednesday. That goes out. So sign up. All right. Tonight's discussion, very much looking forward to this. I hope I make it through because, well, we've got at least one very interesting guest and one guest who actually knows what he's talking about. I'll let you guess who's who. Let's bring him in. We've got Jason Deveau with OMAFA, which is how I pronounce it now, and Austin Anderson with Helena. Let's start maybe with Austin. And then we'll go to Jason, because Austin, it's your first time here. Welcome here. Where are you joining us from? What is your role with Helena?
By the sounds of it, I'm from a balmy Memphis, Tennessee, where it's 33 degrees outside. No, not any snow or white knuckling around here, but
Yeah.
like I said, my name's Austin Anderson. I'm what they call a brand manager for our Adjuvant portfolio here, based out of Memphis, Tennessee, working for Helena Agri Enterprises.
All right. And the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Jason Deveau, also known as Spray Guy on the internets. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thanks. I gave the extreme example of love this morning when I scraped my wife's car when I got up before I left. And if that isn't passion after all these years, I don't know what is.
That is true love. It really is. Did you also put the winter tires on? Because that's pretty important.
No, because I enjoy a little mystery in my life, and I don't know if I'm going to make it to work one day or the next. You got to grab those parts of life.
Yeah, and just slide your way into work.
No, this will pass. I'm in Southern Ontario. This will be gone in 2 days.
Us poor folk here in the East, this is sticking around. I'm pretty sure based on the week ahead, I think we're in for snow. But that's okay. It's just slow release moisture. It's going to be fine. Okay. So Jason does not like that answer.
Never heard that one. I like it.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's in Western Canada, when you get snow, say May 9th, May 10th, that sort of idea, it's just slow release moisture. That's all that is. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. Tonight's topic, adjuvants. It is, I have learned, a very wide and broad topic. There are far more than I thought. And so we're going to dig in tonight into what these products are, what they maybe aren't, when we use them, what kind of payback we can expect. And Dr. Deveau will, of course, keep us on the straight and narrow as far as all the rules and regulations, or so I am told. Absolutely. Okay, but let's start. Austin, for those who maybe don't know, Helena, maybe give us a snapshot of the company, your time, of course, here in Canada, as that will, of course, play into what we talk about tonight.
Well, absolutely. So just a little background on Helena, who we are, and really what we do. So if you think back to what all was going on in agriculture in 1957, I would say that Helena Agri Enterprises, or then Helena Chemical, was in the thick of it in the United States. So we've grown that over the last 67 years to have locations in all 50 states across the United States. We have 500 locations, 6,000 total employees. With that, you learn to adapt to survive. And so part of that adaptation has been, our introduction into our Canadian northern, I guess, going north of the border. So about 15 years ago, through our parent company, Marabini, we started introducing new products into Canada. So not just adjuvants, but bioscience type products, Coron, which some of you guys may be familiar with, slow release nitrogen, and other nutritionals. So, we've been around quite some time, and we're really focused on innovation here at Helena. So when we talk about creating new products, we talk about introducing new solutions to growers, especially here in the U.S. when we're hand in hand with those guys every day, from planting all the way to harvest. Finding out what exactly growers need and how we can help them, ultimately, succeed in their operations. So there's a lot of what we do. So when you think about precision agriculture, you think about custom applications, you think about new products that we bring to the market from that standpoint. So we're kind of got our hand in just about everything that a grower would need across the United States and in certain areas of Canada.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, adjuvants are one where I think it is where we're going to focus tonight. There's probably a couple things that we'll touch on the fringes of that. I think I want to start with, Jason, if you will, a brief explanation to sort of what do we mean by adjuvants? Does it encompass a whole bunch of things, or are these specific things, and really we should make this whole show much broader?
Thanks for the leading question, Lyndsey.
Yeah, you're
If you could see
welcome.
the panic on my face, I made a critical mistake today. In
Oh no.
anticipation of this, I did what I just told my daughter, who just started university, never to do. I had a cram day. And
No.
that was an
Oh,
error. I watched videos, I listened to things I've written, I read things, and I'm so tangled up right now. And I think
mm,
that's actually a perfect introduction to adjuvants because they're highly misunderstood. Um, in fact, I'll throw a definition out there. Austin will shake his head. He's from an upstart company that's only been around 60 some odd years, so I'm sure the definition keeps changing, but I'll throw this out. An adjuvant is any substance, either in a formulation already or something you're going to add to the tank that's intended to enhance pesticide performance in some way or change the physical properties of that spray mix in some fashion. Now, if that doesn't encompass everything, I don't know what does. So it's no wonder it's a little confusing. But if you're forced to kind of sum it up, I would say adjuvants are designed to help with deposition.
okay.
That is to say, to get the product to the target. They're there to help retention, to keep the product on the target. It's a shameful thing to do all this work and have a droplet bounce off. And absorption for those products that you want absorbed to help that product penetrate and get into the target. And for that, I'm pretty much talking about herbicides.
Right.
Fair enough?
I like it. Austin, what do you think? Do you give him a gold star or no?
Yeah, definitely a gold star, right? Because if I was thinking back to my start in the adjuvant business just a little over 3 years ago, I'd have probably said the exact same thing, right? And
Okay.
I think you've covered it, right? I think, from a macro level or at the highest level that you think about, there's a lot of misconceptions around adjuvants, what they are, what they do. When you get into the South or the southern part of the United States, you hear people talk about snake oil or soap or any of those sorts of things. But
Kerosene and flour.
Mm,
yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. But when we think back, so we actually launched our first adjuvant, whenever the United States was allegedly going to the moon, right, in 1969.
Mm,
And since
allegedly.
then, yeah, exactly, right. So so we go and we talk about these things, and you think about like, okay, well, who came up with the idea of putting a non-onyx surfactant or any of these things? Well, what we pride ourselves a lot is a lot of our ideas and our product concepts come directly from the growers that we're working with today, right? So whether you're talking about using fertilizer with atrazine or any of these sorts of things to help improve performance, what we found was, where there's a will, there's a way, and growers have a really good way about doing that. And what we found was being able to look at how can we get these repeatable results? How can we get all these sorts of things to really be able to drive that message home that says, hey, I know you found a really good solution, but hey, we can help refine that solution where we're using less, additives to the tank and really kind of focusing on those sorts of things. So, I mean, it's really an awesome process, from what all we test personally when it comes to adjuvants. So I know, Jason, you talked about it earlier. We test the wetting and spreading. We talk about water quality a lot. How can we improve the environment that the pesticides are having to go into prior to these applications. We talk about how can we improve compatibility, so like, are there things that we can do in the tank to help? I know you guys are probably facing a lot of the same situations, especially when you get out west where, if you're running 4 or 5 gallon work, you may have 6 chemicals in the tank within that 4 or 5 gallon work. So, things can get really complex.
Yeah.
You talked about, some good things about reducing drift. Cause I know where I farm in Mississippi, I hate spraying my neighbor's fields, especially on accident. So like being able to deliver the product where you want it. Deposition, that's a big one, where you're talking about sticking on those leaves and getting down deep in that canopy. That's important. And then, how can we make sure that we get that active ingredient to the site of action as fast as possible? So, when we look at it, it's not necessarily a straight line answer by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something we really look at. And for all the adjuvants that we make and try to introduce into the marketplace for the last almost 50 years, it's pretty incredible to look to see where we've come from where we first started.
Well, if I didn't screw up the definition, let me try to add a little more order onto chaos, because everything you just said.
Bring it.
Oh, when I went through all this today, I was thinking, is this a this? Is this a that? I'm the guy that likes to put labels on stuff. So I got thinking about when you would use an adjuvant, and I kind of went through it cradle to grave. So an adjuvant can be added by the agrochemical company for formulation stability. Like, it's just in the jug, it's in the bag, or it's co-packed. And formulation chemists who know far more than I'll ever know have found ways to shoehorn these products in to do different things. So formulation stability is one kind of adjuvant. Mixing and compatibility, which are a little different but close enough bedfellows, that is another kind of adjuvant. Then, if you're fortunate enough to manage not to create jello and you get it out the nozzle, droplet formation, the physics of going from a sheet to a ligament to a droplet, because honestly, that's what the whole sprayer is intended to do, is take a lot of liquid and break it up into little bits. But the adjuvants can help how that works. Transfer efficiency, once you've released it from the sprayer, that's kind of the last bit of control any operator has. So you're hoping that you've done the right agronomy, you've got the right weather, you've planned everything, your advisors have told you what to spray, but once you've released it, that's it. So getting the droplet to the target, adjuvants can help with that. Then if you're still lucky enough to hit it and get it to stick, that's deposition, perhaps uptake at that point. And finally, you're home for dinner. That product has dried. It's been taken up. Maybe it's good for the next day. What's your residual? So I would consider that kind of a full spectrum of adjuvants. And that's when everything falls down, because I try to break it up more into utility modifiers and then finally activators. And that's where people much smarter than me have cut this pie up in different ways, and I can't figure it out. So how would you define those two things?
So Jason, I like what you're, I'm almost trying to write down some of the things that you're saying. So I can
I don't know what I'm going to say before I say it, but
maybe this is recorded so I can come back and watch it. But
Yeah,
you
maybe.
highlighted a lot of things, right? And so, you talk about like all the things that can go wrong within,
Yeah.
like from the time you've got everything mixed and done. But, ultimately you think about the results of a spray, right? So, people are looking for dead weeds and bugs. And, before I got on today, math is not my strong suit, but I tried my
Same.
best at it. And I was looking at it and saying, all right, well, what would be my best argument if I'm going to talk to a grower about using adjuvants? And so you think about, every drop individually. And so, even if you're using, like even if you're making 20 gallons of water application total volume, right? Like I was watching some podcasts that you guys were doing earlier, and a guy was like, man, 20 gallons of water is still a lot that we can ask for. But when you think about that, like on a per square foot basis, so and so like when you think about that and how important that is, it's less than zero point 0.1 fluid ounces per square foot. And so when you think about that, even when you're going on really heavy amount, like heavy water, or I guess high volume water applications, all that, but that just shows you like how important every droplet is, right? So, whether you're talking about, making sure that you're removing your calcium, magnesium, and iron from your spray water, that can contaminate the various pesticides it can go into. Thinking about how spreading is important, deposition is important, because that 0.1, or it's actually 0.05, something like that. I mean, it's crazy. Whenever you can put like the amount in like a less than a half of a shot glass, and saying, every drop is important. And so like being able to make sure that anybody is thinking about that from the standpoint on saying the most expensive application that I'm going to make on any acre that I'm farming is one that doesn't work. And so whenever you think about, oh man, I can leave out that 25-30 cent an acre application of an adjuvant and going, man, if that could make all the difference, in my experience, I've seen that a couple times with different adjuvants, but I'm not going to talk about that right now, but it's every droplet's important. We need to maximize the performance of each one of those droplets. I mean, Jason, you were talking about earlier, man, there's just so much that can go wrong. And if you can, I guess, raise your margin of error to where you can have a little buffer there, it can really do some pretty amazing things.
Mm-hmm. Ray DeBanco thanks you for your real world math. The size of a shot glass is something that most of us can relate to, and how much actual liquid and or liquid of your choice fits in there. So it's a really good point, Austin, and that's at 20 gallons, right, an acre.
Yep.
We've got, so Jason Vogt is in the chat out of Manitoba. So those Westerners, as you said, we have had this discussion many times on the show on what's high water volume depending on where you are, and there are areas of the West that, I mean, 20, you would never do 20 gallons, like, and never's a long time, but I'm just saying. So and I think that's one of those really key points of when you think about just how little total volume you may be applying, and then you think about all the different things that you may have in there, and maybe they're two herbicides, maybe it's a herbicide and a fertility product, maybe it's like they all have to play nice in the tank. They have to play nice moving through, and then you want them to actually do what they're supposed to. And to me, it just seems like one of my, I guess, like sit back moments. And I think Jason's got a good question here. Jason Vogt. Sorry, there's so many Jasons. There's producer Jay. There's maybe I'll just call you Dr. J. Jason. When
Jason,
so
you're
there's
referring to Lyndsey.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's you, Dr. Jason.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll go with you. So the question is, when we want all these things to play nice, when we want to put them in the tank, what are, seeing as you are our guiding star here on our rules and regulations, are like, will a label tell us what we need to know, and will it stop us from making a horrible mistake?
Oh, gee, Lyndsey, we've only got an
Mm,
hour.
I know, actually less than that now. We've almost
Well,
eaten through.
let's
2
start with
cards
the
there.
fundamental difference between Canada's regulatory agency and the United States' current
Yes.
practice. And Austin, look, man, this is where you jump in and correct me because I don't know what I don't know. But in the US, adjuvants as a rule aren't regulated. Now, I know there are a few small exceptions when phytotoxicity comes into the picture, but for the most part, adjuvants are caveat emptor, buyer beware. In Canada, it's a little different. So I'm just going to go ahead and split church and state and say that there are utility modifiers and then there are activators. Utility modifiers, I wrote this down, so I'm going to cheat and bloody well read it because it's good.
Do it.
Utility modifiers might mask pesticide odor, condition your water in some way, like maybe you've got bad carrier, improve your mixing. I mentioned that, reduce drift, improve cleaning. Those are all fairly mechanical. They're not really designed to affect the mode of action of the herbicide or improve it in any way. The ones that get registered or require data in Canada are the ones that are the activators. These are the ones that have some interaction with your target and perhaps introduce the pesticide in a way that it wouldn't have been introduced normally. So in Canada, we need regulatory data. And no secret to the big agrochemical companies, new Corteva or whatever they're calling themselves now, BASF, Syngenta, etc., they will tend to register their pesticide with regulatory along with whichever activator they feel makes it work. They're not going to leave any meat on the plate afterwards. They know that if they can get it to stick a little better or spread a little better, then they're going to bloody well do it. Their limitation, though, tends to be physical. So in the 50s, I've got this really neat index card that was given to me, Dr. Doug Bauman, formerly of Syngenta. It's like a recipe card. It's yellowed. It has one of their herbicides. It has 3 ingredients. That was it. And one of them was an inert, talc. So lots of room to throw adjuvants there to do better things. Whereas 3 or 4 years ago, some of the more complicated herbicides have 40 moving parts in a single jug, which is just cuckoo bananas how you get all of these things to play nice. So that jug, which we want to keep small and manageable so nobody pulls the small of their back trying to fill in an inductor bowl, only has so much room. So the agrochemical company says, I know I need this activator to help it to spread, but I can't make it fit in the jug without turning it to jello. So I'm going to co-pack that. Or I'm going to have on the label, you need a non-ionic surfactant. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say it by name because I'm making both of those, so use mine. So this is a very roundabout way by saying the label in Canada will guide you to the use of adjuvants when the agrochemical company thinks that they're needed to make the product work the way they want it to work. They'll be very clear about that. So you can kind of go ahead and throw any utility modifier that you have the courage to put in. That's on you. But when it comes to the activator, the label is going to be very clear. And I think I gave you a slide that might be worth bringing up right now to kind of...
Is this the one about rules?
This is the one that you love the most.
Yeah, I really do. This is probably my favorite one that we've gotten in a while.
There he is.
Captain Holt. Yes.
Who's Captain Holt, Lyndsey?
So if you don't know who Captain Holt is, we can't be friends. So carrying on. Anyway, fantastic character.
9-9.
So incredibly well written.
He's my
Brooklyn
fan too.
9-9. Yeah,
so when I do this presentation, I've got Holt back here, and it is no person shall use a pest control product in a way that's inconsistent with the directions on the label. Sounds clear, but to add a little depth to that, you can't... It means that the label has to have at least one tank mix partner that specifies the use of an adjuvant, and the adjuvant you use has to be registered for that crop and allow tank mixing. I know, clear as mud. Basically, if the label says don't do it, you can't. If the label says do it, then none of your tank mix partners can say no.
Okay.
So it's kind of
it's like a game of logic.
I know, it's the lowest common denominator. As long as nobody says no, I think
then
it's
you're
a go.
Good. Okay.
Hey, I'm getting a shirt made. If no one says no, then you're a go.
Then you're a go. Okay. Austin is probably just cannot wait to weigh in on this. But we have to do a read. So we're going to pause here on Captain Holt. Canadian Farmers. Hosted by Real Ag Sean Haney, brought to you by Field Heroes, and powered by the Western Grades Research Foundation, the Pests and Predators podcast is an in-depth look at the many insects who share our fields. Find out more at Real Agriculture or download the podcasts or visit fieldheroes.ca. All right. So, Austin, there's obviously, your team here in Canada. I'm sure they're happy to answer specific questions. But when you're sort of looking at this on the whole, and obviously Canada and US are different, where do these products fit best? To Jason's point about, recognizing what the label says you can and cannot do and where that puts you, how do you best sort of convey where each of these products works best?
Well, a lot of it's through experience, but I want to, go back to the meme that we saw about, making sure that we're consistent, because something that we're not interested in doing is creating more problems for anybody. So, we're all about staying on the label. We're all about making the right recommendations, but at the same time, like we do a lot of investigation around, water testing, spray water testing, irrigation testing, all those sorts of things just to make sure that, not every problem is staring you right in the face. So like sometimes you can look at water and it looks like it's great and it's tasty to drink and it has high in iron and you find yourself, you know, uh, up a problem. So, from my standpoint, I thought the question was a little bit more around like compatibility and how does it help with multiple active ingredients and those sorts of things. And so, unfortunately, it's one of those where experience probably trumps everything. So, that's where we always try to make sure that before we make a 5,000 gallon batch, we want to make sure that we do jar tests before, from that standpoint. But, I don't know enough about the Canadian regulatory environment to, talk about things. But, when we talk about, how we make recommendations and, those sorts of things, they're all rooted. If you can see Helena or Helena Products Group on any label, we've got years and years and years of data to support any recommendation that we're making. So, I know that we want to make sure that, if a product is making a recommendation for a crop oil concentrate, we want to make sure that we're using those right categories and those sorts of things, just because, there's no sense in, barking up that tree if you don't have to. Right. And so they know, they invented the chemistry, they've done the work, and so have we. And in a lot of cases, we're actually co-developing adjuvants with these
Right.
basic manufacturers, Syngenta, Bayer, BASF, et cetera, all over the world, just really trying to make sure that we're going hand in hand with them and making those recommendations. So, yeah.
Which I think, and Jason, to your point about there's only so much you can put in a package that works with the system that we're using, and so to have other add-ins that may be useful, to have them are things you can buy off the shelf and pick and choose what you want to add to that tank mix, I think adds that flexibility. So it makes sense if you think about it that way, right? Like the product should work, but that doesn't mean that your water is perfect, right? It doesn't mean that every tank mix is going to be okay right out of the box. Jason, go ahead. And then someone has mentioned Dawn dish soap in the comments, so you
Oh
bet we're
God,
going to talk about that in a minute.
beautiful.
Okay,
All right,
carrying
let's
on. Yes.
continue to split things a little bit. So the
Oh, I love
adjuvants that
it.
deal with tank mix compatibility, the utility, uh, I've been impressed with them. So back in 2019, Mike Cobra, our provincial weed specialist, and we started looking at a bad tank mix of sulfur, foliar fertilizers, and herbicides, UAN herbicide and ATS in corn. It was just gumming everything up. So we played around with tank mix order, and I think a lot of people did this at the same time. The thing is, if you're mixing into a fertilizer as a carrier instead of water, those are two very different beasties. And for convenience, quite often you get UAN and the sulfur mixed together. Unfortunately, the solution to this tank mix compatibility issue was to put UAN in first, then the herbicide, then ATS. So while, hey, that's great, way to solve that problem, it doesn't actually solve the problem because they're still stuck with it mixed together. And then
Right.
a few years later, I was working with Mike Shriver, who did some really cool work with BASF. He was looking at compatibility agents, and they weren't BASF compatibility agents. It was across the board. And he looked at emulsifiable concentrates, which are quite soluble in water, and he tried to break the system. He put twice as much as you would require in cold UAN, so like just double jeopardy there. And it all floated up to the top, but the slightest agitation had it resuspended because of the compatibility agent. Then he went with NSC, which is not water soluble. He added twice as much of that as you probably should have to cold UAN. Add the stabilizer, the compatibility agent, and it sank to the bottom. But again, resuspended beautifully just with light agitation. And then to close the circle, I said, all right, Smarty, let's see what you got with the UAN ATS problem that Mike and I found years ago. So it came pre-mixed. Then he added the stabilizer, then the herbicide, and it was gorgeous. Still a little bit of particulate, like some of it flocculated, but it still would get through a filter. The warning on that one, though, is that the stabilizer has to go in before the herbicide, which opens up a whole other ball of wax about tank mix order. And I'll just cap that by saying the less water you use, my Western Canadian friends, the more moving parts you put in your tank. And if you're using micros like fertilizers, you are asking for a world of hurt. And, go ahead, risk it. But every time that you make that tank mix more concentrated, colder, and more complicated, there's only so much utility modifier can do for you. So just be aware. And that goes all the way back to the jar test again, like Austin pointed out. If the label's silent, if no one's got data, if you're trying to roll with it, get yourself a mason jar and save yourself a world of hurt.
Okay, so that was colder, more complicated, and of course
volume, more
and less volume. Yeah, more concentrated. So Austin, that makes me wonder why on earth Helena wanted to come to Canada, because that sounds like every spring. But anyway, okay. So I mean, it's a great way to sort of think about it, though, right? Is like, okay, so and we have to think about what each of these products does. And there was a question, Jason Vogt did ask about, is it important to distinguish between the different kinds of products that are out there? And so Jason did say, that we've got those sort of mechanical, the utility ones, and then we've got sort of the other ones. So, is it important that we talk about the difference between, say, a surfactant and, and something that's going to help with keeping it in suspension, et cetera? Like, is that important to understand all the differences between them?
I absolutely think so. And then, this is the rabbit hole that you go down, right? And so you talk about the differences between adjuvants and surfactants. I'd be curious to know what everybody's opinion may look like in in the comments. But, it's really and truly, it's like, why the ag economy is tight right now, and people, like, we want to make sure that we have a full understanding on what we're getting when we're buying something, right? So no matter if you're buying something on Amazon or buying something from Helena or whoever, it's just, being able to honestly articulate, like, what are the features and benefits of the product that you're getting, and understanding, like, the values, what you're paying for. And so a lot of times, especially for us, it's like, we're trying to build in a lot of this functionality. And, Jason, you talked about it pretty extensively when, there's so many different products. There's, like, especially with a lot of these active ingredients going off patents, and quality of inert ingredients, quality of AI, like, all these things are going to play a huge factor into whether or not you're seeing dead weeds and bugs, and then increasing yield of fungicides and stuff like that. And so, when you talk about being able to bring that consistency, that's where adjuvants come in. I mean, I was on the basic side of things for the better part of 10 years. And I can tell you, it wasn't in Canada, but I can tell you I had in 10 years, maybe 15 seconds worth of adjuvant training. And that was amongst reading the labels of the different products that I was selling. But, honestly, it's just a huge advantage to be able to have the experience that we have in regards to the research and development, the longevity. if you want to, I guess it's not bragging if it's true, right? So, if it
That's right.
wasn't for Helena, there wouldn't be any such thing as AMS replacements. There wouldn't be high surfactant oil concentrates. There wouldn't be a lot of these different categories that maybe are, I guess, a subset of the utility versus the activator segment. I mean, we've been using, herbicide activators since the 80s, and really being able to pioneer this space and, getting back to every drop matters and, all these things. And, we saw the gaps in a lot of these formulations that, everybody's buying today. And it's, believe it or not, it's not active ingredient plus water or active ingredient plus non-ionic surfactant. It's a lot of those things to be able to help suspend or dissolve the active ingredient to make it to where it's usable. So my thoughts are, from the standpoint on the surfactant system that is in the jugs of the pesticides, from the most, in my experience in both farming and not, or farming and ag business and all this stuff, is they found the right mix for their product to stay as available as it possibly could until it was poured into the jug. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's exactly what those products are designed to do. But at the same time, they're not designed to deal with high pH water or really low pH water or mixing with other pesticides or all these things. And so there's just a gap and a need in between all these things that really provides a lot of functionality, and, I get back to that 0.1 fluid ounces per square foot of an application. And that's why every drop in that pesticide formulation needs to bring something to you, or whether it's me or you or grower or anybody. And, adjuvants is the best way to do that. I mean, I can tell you personally, it's a product that we sell in Canada. It's called Markdown, and we sell it in the U.S. as grounded. And I can tell you, I've walked complaint after complaint when I was on the basic manufacturer side, where I can draw a line straight through the field telling you where the product was and where it wasn't. And so I'm not saying that just because I'm the adjuvant guy or anything like that, but I can tell you I was the guy paying the complaint whenever I was having to walk it. And so when you're looking at it and saying, oh man, when you can make a residual herbicide do its full job, knowing that, hey, if I need a couple extra days or another 3 or 4 days between applications, I'm farming 5,000 acres. It's going to be a long time before I get back to this place. And knowing that a small investment or a small, you know, use of an adjuvant in correlation with this can really make the difference between, a successful application and not.
I'm used to us having different product names, East and West, but I forgot we have to think North and South too. So that's also important, is that same product, different names potentially. Okay, one of the things, Dr. Deveau, I'm going to go to you on this one first. One of the questions we get often is, and as you said, once we can do so many things up until the point that spray is released from the nozzles, and then it is up to the heavens to decide all sorts of different things. Drift is one of those questions that I'm sure maybe you're getting bored of, Dr. Deveau.
Yeah, entirely.
Right, entirely, so much. However, it does come up. And Austin, I'll go to you on this after Dr. Deveau. But is there good science that says, hey, we can just add something to the tank and don't worry about it? Should it be first on our list or last on our list? I guess is where I'm going with that one.
I've been enjoying the way this conversation's been moving. Every time we just start to touch on activator adjuvants, we go right back to utility again. So I would consider drift retardants a utility modifier again.
Okay.
So is there good evidence for them? Heck yeah. They can absolutely work. And my experience with them tends to be around the lock group from Winfield.
Yep.
But that's okay. There's some commonalities. Here's how I would couch this conversation. Your agronomic decision of when to spray a herbicide, how clean your field is, weather conditions, having a crop spacing that maybe makes sense to deal with weeds, planting early, harvesting, all the things I have no right to talk about, all the agronomics. That's number one. Then number two is your sprayer. How fast are you driving? How high is your boom? What's your droplet size? What are the weather conditions you're spraying in? That's number two. Then there's your product choice. How does it work? What can it tolerate for water volume? What kind of droplets give you the best result? And how do those interface with the weed you're trying to control, or a fungicide or an insecticide? When the droplet hits the target, does it run off? Does it bounce? Does it stick? All of that stuff, that's the first thing you consider. And if all that fails you, if the situation is such that you're still not happy about drift, or you just deem the situation so bad that you need some extra insurance, that is when you add the drift retardant to the tank. It's not the first thing, it's the last. It's the sprinkles on the donut. A good example is Liberty. We've got a lot of Westerners on here. Liberty has a pretty low specific gravity, and it tends to make smaller droplets than we might like natively. So some of the better drift retarding agents take that full spectrum of droplets, and they do a very cool thing. They get rid of the smaller aspect of the spray quality without pushing the whole thing up into big droplets.
Right.
If we're spraying low volumes, we'd like to use smaller droplets so we can spread that load around. So any drift mitigating agent that tends to make bigger droplets overall, you don't hit as many weeds, or it doesn't get retained the way you would like. But a good drift mitigating agent just gets rid of the smaller population and pushes them in. So your average droplet size doesn't really change a whole lot, but you get rid of the driftable fines. Very long-winded roundabout answer. Yes, an adjuvant can help. No, that I think it's the last thing you should do, but that, yes, it does work. I've seen the data. It's been well established. It is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It is not your shield. It's just a little extra. And sometimes that's enough.
Great. Okay. So, Austin, similar question then. When a grower or an agronomist is asking about, where some of these products fit, when we're thinking about drift, I think it's a very judicious sort of thought process to think about, where these products fit and how much we can gain by using them. So when it comes to drift, what is sort of the ROI question, the discussion? Does it allow that bit of insurance?
Well, drift is actually one of the easier ROI calculations to measure, especially like when you can say, all right, well, I'm going to lose 30% of my spray to the neighbor. You can calculate what that loss is. But, Jason, you bring up a lot of good points, from the standpoint on DRA or drift control adjuvants or drift reduction adjuvants. I mean, it's a really good feature to have, right? Because when you're thinking about delivering that full 0.1 fluid ounces per acre to the design target, right? And I'm almost on the other side of the spectrum where, I'm doing a deep dive into understanding, hey, am I using a group 15 herbicide or am I using a group 1 or, those sorts of things to be able to say like, hey, is drift more important than spreading and wetting or whatever the case may be? Is there a good kind of blend in between the two? I mean, from that standpoint, I mean, there's lots of adjustments and a lot of tinkering you can do on your spray rigs with your nozzle types and all that sort of stuff. But like what I'm going to say is about from a level of efficacy standpoint or like efficacy and efficiency is, like being able to make one small addition to the tank or doing kind of the things that you're already doing without getting out and changing all the nozzles on the 120-foot boom or changing the pressure from this field to this field or having a mark on your pressure gauge where it says, hey, when the wind's blowing 16 miles an hour, you put it here, or if it's blowing less than that, whatever. I mean, just from being able to just kind of go and treat your fields and kind of, understand that standpoint. But, I think different applications need different things. So drift is important. I mean, for us in the U.S., for dicamba, it is required by law, and 2,4-D is the same way. through that. And then, as we get into our Endangered Species Act, and, Jason, I know you've talked a little bit about data and the lack of regulatory in the U.S. There's about to be a pile of people that are invested in drift control agents. And so, like, whenever you have the United States government saying you need to reduce your driftable fines by 30%, and having adjuvants that qualify for that and the testing that goes behind that is something that, we've done for a long time, and being able to look at that and say, we can create more droplets in that, I'm going to call it Goldilocks zone. So, I mean, I know you talked a lot about, making, reducing the smaller droplets, but, drift control agents do a weird thing too, where they reduce the boulders also, and I call boulders like the huge droplets. So, being able to make sure you've got more of a uniform spray pattern, like thinking about that is more important for us. Especially, you're talking about different spray volumes and, trying to cover an entire country with one fell swoop. It's pretty impossible. But from that standpoint, it's a really easy thing to do. You're already mixing, you're already pouring, you're already doing those sorts of things. And, nozzles aren't cheap. Breakdowns are unfortunate, and you'd hate to be messing with a machine that has been treating you well all year, those sorts of things. So, I mean, I definitely think they have a fit, and that was a long way of just saying, I think you're just being able to evaluate from an agronomic standpoint on what's the active ingredient need the most, whether that's drift or deposition or spreading or wetting, those sorts of things.
Okay, we're going to pause there for just a moment. We've got our last read of the night, and then I'll let Jason talk only about the modifiers that he wants to talk about, maybe, but also Dawn dish soap. All right, Producer Jay, if you would, we'll go to our last read. Our sponsors for the Agronomists are Pests and Predators, MMP, and the Corn School. Big corn yields demand intense management. From tillage strategies to nitrogen management, hybrid selection, pest management, and more, Real Ag's Corn School is a video and podcast series that helps you face every moment of the growing season. The Corn School is made possible by support from BASF and Pride Seeds. Learn more at cornschool.com. All right, we have a lot to cram in a short amount of time because Austin, you'll have to go to YouTube after this. Lots of comments in here asking about specific products and how they stack up to some of the competitors. So I think Jason Vogt out of Manitoba and Austin, you guys should connect and you guys should talk. Okay, quickly, because we've talked about it on here before, where does 10 seconds of Dawn dish soap, Dr. Deveau, fit into this adjuvant conversation? Does it fix everything?
No, but it does work, and that's what kills me.
Yes.
It can
All right,
work.
okay. What does it actually work for, though? Like
here's
works for
the
clay
history,
stuff, right?
as it was told to me by, I think he was with Bayer back in the day. There was some sort of formulation thing in Western Canada, and it was a real cold spring, and everybody gummed their sprayers up at the same time. And it was just an all hands on deck moment for this agrochemical company and all their salespeople to help these farmers out, because they didn't want them cleaning up the sprayers with a shovel, and they didn't want them adding hot water in there and making a bigger mess. So they went to Costco and they bought all the bloody Dawn dish soap that they could. But I swear to, this is how it was told to me. The only intent was to get the stuff loose enough to get it out of the sprayer.
Right.
That was it. And from there, the legend grew. A 10-second or a 5-second squeeze was a surfactant, or near enough to a rather expensive surfactant, which I won't name because I never got confirmation that it was close. And it does tend to prevent things from getting sticky. So Mike Cobra and I took a bunch of Sencor, and I built a government machine, which is to say it was useless. All it did was recirculate the Sencor through a filter over and over and over into a 10-gallon pail, creating foam. And in one of them, we added Dawn dish soap. In another, we didn't. And then we took the filter out. And the first thing we saw was when we added Dawn, that filter was so much cleaner than when we didn't. So the first thing I'll say is Dawn will keep you in the field longer. And if you limit your expectation to that, less plugs and clogs, then you're laughing. And I've never seen any evidence that it has any phytotoxic effect. But then I warn you this: when we rinsed the filter with the goop all through it, and then rinsed the filter that we used Dawn with, that rinsate, we did a bioassay and ruined the day of any soybean we touched. So even though the particulate matter passed through the filter and prevented plugs, it in no way got rid of the active ingredient. So you're not absolved from, the classic triple rinse and a decent clean out if the product warrants it, but it will stop these nuisance plugs. And if you're in the UK, it's called Fairy, which is super fun.
That's even better. And I have to say, this might be my favorite episode for ridiculous words and phrases that don't mean what you think they mean. And hats off to Ray DeBenko for biting his tongue for most of this episode. Okay, so there you go. All right, so Dawn dish soap. One day we'll do like a whole episode on what Dawn dish soap does and does not do. However, and you know what? I actually we had a couple slides that I haven't even referred to, and they were lots of fun. And the other one I want to hit on just quickly is again, but on the chemistry side, is this hard water issue. And we've done, I think, a whole episode on like water quality. But just to touch on that one, it does feel to me like it is the one thing that there's a lot more awareness about hard water, about testing your water, about making sure that if you've got hard water, you can do something about it. So, Austin, is that higher up on the list of sort of trying to eliminate some of the barriers to getting a really effective pass?
Well, I think it's the easiest thing you can do. So, I mean, if nobody takes anything from me other than the shot glass comment and this one is test your spray water, test your irrigation water. From the spray water perspective, you can't look at it and tell you and look at it and say, oh yeah, that's bad. In a lot of cases. So test your spray water. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into this. So water pH can have an impact on your herbicide, fungicide, insecticide half-life. So that's where it really comes into fact where, hey, you want to get the maximum punch of, herbicide, fungicide, or insecticide. So whether you're talking about low pH or high pH, generally speaking, they're more stable and they're more longer lasting at lower pH versus high pH. But, you think about how fragile some of these new active ingredients are and how susceptible they are to calcium, magnesium, and iron, and really being able to tie up those active ingredients. And, I'm not sure how much herbicide resistance you guys have or how long you guys have been dealing with
We've
it.
got lots. Yeah.
And, if you believe some of the universities around the U.S. and probably other parts of the world too, but poor water quality probably had just as much to do with the resistance buildup as cut rates and all these other things, right? So if you're cutting a rate to a half rate, you're still seeing dead weeds or kind of dead weeds, and you've got hard water and you're essentially making a 25% application versus 100 or whatever the case may be. So, it's very important. It's something that's easy to fix, easy to work on. It's very cost effective. You're talking about using pints or quarts per 100 gallons of water. So very low use applications, depending on how bad your water is. But, the other side of that coin is your irrigation water. When you think about how many pounds is an acre inch of water, you're not using nearly that on any other input that you're using across your farm. And that can have an impact on nutrient availability, all those fun things that I'm sure we can get into at a later episode. But test your water, treat your water. I mean, you'll be better for it. You'll make better applications. It'll help in a lot of different ways.
Mark says, how hard can water be without needing modification? And my smart aleck answer is, if you're asking, yes, your water needs modification.
If you can walk on it, it's probably a bad idea.
It's probably
parts per million is a number I keep hearing.
Okay, 600 parts per million. Okay.
And pick your poison.
Yeah.
You can still see. So we've got recommendations for some of our water conditioners all the way down to 200 parts per million. But when you're talking about that, the harder your water, the harder it is to change the pH and those sorts of things. Right. And just making sure that, like whenever you're using some of these chemistries, they have a tendency to salt out and all these other things, just making sure you're aware of all those things. But like I said, we've got recommendations from 200 to 5,000 parts per million. So, yeah.
I agree with Austin. Testing your water is just, man, it's quick, it's easy, and it's a surprise you don't need. In 2022, we had an adjuvant company test water all over Ontario, and we're pretty lucky. We have really good water. And in 2024, at our Spray Smart event, we asked people to bring in their water. So we got it from wells, we got it from municipal, we got a little bit off the surface. And with one or two minor exceptions, everybody stayed under 600 parts per million hardness. Total dissolved solids were under 325, which is really good. And the alkalinity, especially bicarbonate, less than 500 milligrams per liter. And these are all kind of boundaries from people smarter than me that say this far, no further. Western Canada is different.
Very different.
You're pulling from sloughs, so there's high turbidity, and God knows what else you're getting in there as they concentrate. Aquifers can be full of sodium, which is just wild to think about. And that's a cation that generally doesn't get gathered up in a water test, but it certainly matters. So that water absorbs minerals and that antagonizes herbicides. So in that case, the 1% AMS is kind of your safety. Okay. And Austin, you said you guys have an AMS replacement. So does that mean you can use that with dicamba? Because AMS is a big no-no with dicamba.
No, not necessarily.
So too bad. I was hoping.
He was hoping.
Yeah. So when we think about like AMS, that was something that was found out by growers enhancing herbicide performance a long, long time ago. And so what we thought about is, what about iron?
What about iron?
So right. So AMS doesn't sequester iron. And so like if people have high iron and they're using AMS and being like, well, why is my water still, giving me fits, maybe that's an option. So like understanding, how could we improve and build on AMS in general from a herbicide uptake standpoint, but also a sequestering standpoint, for hard water and all those other things and pH reduction. So really being able to put a lot of different things in one jug that encompasses a lot of the issues that people find versus just kind of using more of the same and ignoring the results in certain cases.
Cool.
We are rapidly running out of time, and it's really too bad because I have a lot more questions. But I would be remiss if I did not also take just a little bit of time to send people for some more information, including Jason Bradley Stovey. Could you put up our favorite slide of the night? Captain Holt is up there, but this one might be my very favorite. This is where you can go for more info, including, of course, Micron Woman and Exploding Sprayer Myths, found at realagriculture.com, as well as our YouTube channel. So we're going to take this moment. Dr. Deveau, what can we expect in the coming months, potentially, from this duo? Yes.
Well, our quiet partner, Jay, who's working in the background to make us all look good.
Yes.
Yep. Has been, he's always been the silent partner with Exploding Sprayer Myths. Tom and I write the script, act it badly, and then send all the scraps to Jay, who, through some miracle of computer technology, turns it into a video. But he does so much more. Just 1 second's pause or just one wipe or some sound effect takes it from something barely tolerable to something almost amusing. So let me thank him publicly here for being the unsung hero of these videos. And every time Tom and I think we're out, they drag us back in. We've got a new video coming out as soon as Jay can find a 25-hour day to finish it up.
That sounds about right. Okay. So watch for that. I'm excited. I haven't even seen like a draft yet. So I'm looking forward to this one. Also, the middle image there, is that yogurt? Is that what that was?
I'll never tell. Have you ever seen the Poltergeist?
Yes.
I feel me around, like Lyndsey. Don't spin me around.
Don't, and there you go. Anyway, okay. So Austin, this is what you have to look forward to. For our next episode, I'll send you this as homework. Okay, so that is very important. Everyone watch for that as well. But Austin, we did have some questions in the comments, and Helena has been in Canada about 15 years. So shout out, of course. Where can people find Helena people in Canada? Is there a website they can go to? 1-800 number? Where should they go?
Yeah, so definitely start off by going to helenaagri.com. So that's our US based website, but for the most part, you'll be able to get in contact with us
Okay,
through the
perfect.
website and be able to learn a little bit more about our products. And what great looks like is we continue what we've been doing in the US and Canada, and you guys reach out to us and say, hey, we really need a product that looks like this or looks like that, or these are the problems that we're having.
Yep.
And then we can really put it to work with our research and our laboratories and our testing and things like that. We can bring new, unique products to you guys to where you can use them and enjoy them.
Mm-hmm. That's really the key part, is solving problems and making us all happy. That's really
Yeah.
what's important here. Yeah. Okay. And Sean was at Agritrade and your team was there. So definitely out and about, and I'm sure we'll see more of you on the show circuit this winter. Dr. Deveau, what do you have coming up beyond exciting videos? What's next on your schedule? What'll keep you busy in the next little while?
My world is still drones, Lyndsey. It's lecture season now, so I keep a
It's all
calendar where,
drones. Yeah.
honest to God, I get an alert that I have to be somewhere in 2 days, and I just hope I don't overcommit. So it's lecture season. I'm talking from church basements to auditoriums on everything you never wanted to know. Drones still continues to occupy a
Okay.
lot of people's
Yep.
imagination, and every time I think we have a really good handle on how they work,
Mm-hmm.
something fundamental changes, which just happened about 2 months ago.
Right.
I'll say it like this. Up until now, I've always said drones will always create a downwash. They're not helicopters. They're their own unique method of
Mm-hmm.
application
Mm-hmm.
until that bloody T-100 came out. And
Oh no.
it's capable of actual flight. And what that
Mm.
means is
Back
all
to the
bets are
drawing
off.
board.
Yep.
Yeah.
The downwash is
Back.
gone. It can outrace a
Yep.
car, and what comes out the back of it is more like what you're going to see with a helicopter and a plane, plus the additional
Mm.
productivity, which has me eating my words. But in
Right.
my defense, the design changed. Here we go
Still.
again.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it's a to-do list for Austin for the Helena
Ride
Group
a drone.
to make sure to get all the things that work with drones as well. We're not
Well,
opening that can of worms at the end of the show. Don't
Lyndsey, I
even
will
try.
say this. Do you know an MSO in Austin? You might know it. An MSO used with a rotary atomizer on a drone. Do you know what it does?
What does
Reduces
it do?
drip.
No,
Uh,
it makes droplets
what?
smaller. That was just
What?
determined a few weeks ago. It worked in exactly
Okay.
the opposite way anyone expected. So we got to keep researching adjuvants too. Sorry, buddy.
All right. Well, it keeps
That
you
keeps
both
me in
in
business.
Yeah, me too.
there. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay, thank you both. Fantastic discussion. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time and your attention and your knowledge. Thanks to everybody joining us in the chat and in the comments as well. We'll be back next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, for the Agronomists. Cheers, everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.